What's good? It's your boy Fanon. Welcome back to the channel. Subscribers, if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe and hit the bell icon. And that way you can be notified when we drop new videos. And thank you to everybody that supports the channel. Really do appreciate it. Tonight, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite fighters that I don't do a lot of videos about because, until he fights, because he's just been having a hard way over the last few years. And that is James Degale. I was a big fan of James Degale. I really thought very highly of him when he beat Andre Dirrell, when he beat Lucian Bute. I really thought that this guy was a top-notch boxer, and I liked him a lot, man. But as of late, it's been a real hard time, man. He got the brakes beaten off of him by Badu Jack. Khalib Truax, he lost to Khalib Truax. And then in the rematch with Khalib Truax, it was really tough on him winning back the IBF World Super Middleweight title. So, I just haven't had a lot of real positive things to say about James Degale. But today I do, man. Because this is one of the times, man, where, sometimes, discretion is the better part of valor. And he has decided to vacate his IBF belt. And I think that he made one of the best decisions possible in doing so. Yeah, so I'm sorry I had to pause the recording of this video. So forgive the interruption, but yeah, man, discretion is a better part of valor. Sometimes you just got to make a good decision, man, and not go out like a chump. And James Degale, it could be argued that he ducked Jose Uzcategui. I always mispronounce his name, but the guy from Bolivia that had just got done beating Andre Dirrell and is the interim IBF World Middleweight Champion. He's 27-2 with 23 KOs. And let me tell you, man, that was going to be a bloody beatdown if James Degale got in there with him. Man, if James Degale had a hard time with Truax and goddamn, man, I always forget. I don't know, Badu Jack. He was just gonna have a world of trouble from Uzcategui. That was just gonna be a terrible beating, and I think that he makes, and it might have been a career-ending beating, man. I mean, like I said, man, I'm a fan of James Degale. James Degale, I think, has had a really good career. I hope that he's made a lot of money, but at 32 years old, and I don't think he's actually had a knockout. He hasn't stopped anybody in the last 4 years, going on 4 years. It's about a time for this dude to start taking some soft touches, and better for him to take some soft touches without the belt or to take a big money fight with what I think he's going to go for, which is a rematch with George Groves, a guy that had beaten him before a few years back. George Groves beat him by majority decision back in about 7 years ago, back in 2011. It's time for him to head on back to the UK and get that rematch on and try to cash out with a good fight, man. And my hat's off to him for doing that. Now, if he had held on to the IBF belt and did a lot of ducking, a lot of, trying to make excuses for why he can't fight Uzcategui, that I would have had a problem with, and I would have had to call him out on it. And, but I just think that with Uzcategui, that's just a fight he can't win. And on top of it, it's going to be a fight he can't win that's not going to pay him nearly as much money as a boxing match that he probably can win, which would be for the WBA 168-pound championship. Now, the bad thing about that is that if he does this, and he's able to make the fight with George Groves, James Degale bout is probably a bigger bout than James Degale, Callum Smith, and it'll kind of throw off that whole thing that was going on over there with the World Boxing Super Series. But I expect that I expect that. I expect that to happen, man. And also is another thing, he didn't allow that, unification trumps mandatory thing, because if he went on ahead and tried to set up a bout with George Groves, then he could make an argument that he's trying to unify the belts. But if he unified the WBA belt with Callium Smith with George Groves, which is for sure not a guaranteed thing. That's still hanging out Jose Uzcategui, and in a fight that I just don't think James Degale could win. And if James Degale unified, then he's still not going to fight Jose, because Jose is going to beat the brakes off of him. So, this is one of these times when ducking, ducking is desired, I guess, man. So now, my understanding is that Jose is gonna he's gonna be elevated from the interim to the full IBF 168-pound title, and I think that's a little bit unfortunate. He's an interim champ. I would like for somebody to see somebody, actually win the belt and not get elevated to the title. I want to see him win it in the ring instead of having him, become elevated. And in my book, even then, I got a lot of respect for Jose, no doubt about it, man. I didn't think that he was going to beat. I thought Andre Dirrell was coming on strong a good bit in that original bout, but when he came out and just beat the brakes off of Andre Dirrell in that rematch, I was like, man, yeah, this guy is this guy's the real deal, man. This guy's the real deal. And of his last, and pretty much everybody he beats, man, it's a TKO. He's had the last unanimous decision he had was back in 2012, but he lost by, he did lose by unanimous decision to Matt Korobov, but, in a 10-round decision. It was the scorecards were 91, 97, 92, 96, and then 91, 97. I got to go back and look at that fight. I didn't actually see that fight, but I was familiar with the Julius Jackson, the Derek Findlay, Fabian Pena, of course, Andre Dirrell. And I think this cat's really hitting his stride. I do believe he's one of these guys that have been fighting, that have been boxing a long time. I don't really like one thing that like Trey X had said about Uzcategui is like, I don't necessarily like how he keeps his weight on his front foot, heavily on his front foot, man. But hey, it's working for him. Now, what I would like to see from him, in the future, of course, is to unify the titles at 168 pounds. I mean, that's a big thing that I'd like to see in a lot of, out of a lot of people, out of a lot of weight classes. And I think that there's some real good bouts that could be made. The most realistic one, obviously, is a unification with George Groves, or the winner of George Groves and Jose Uzcategui, and James Degale, if James Degale goes over there, but also David Benavidez. David Benavidez was trying to go to Top Rank, but his promotional deal with Top Rank fell through when his current promoter filed a lawsuit against him and said, "Look, we're going to defend our promotional rights to David Benavidez." So he wasn't really, he wasn't able to do that. So David Benavidez is available. And now the problem, of course, obviously is the WBO champ in Gilberto Ramirez, because first of all, Gilberto Ramirez ain't fighting nobody. And he just had a very, very difficult time. Well, I don't want to say he had an unnecessarily difficult time in his last fight. I can't remember. With Angulo. I mean, God, dog, man, it just looked like Angulo. It's just like every time Angulo hurt Jose Ramirez, he went on cruise control. And I'm not sure if it's just a case maybe Gilberto Ramirez needs to go up to 175 pounds, because he really is a very tall and long 168 pounder. But whatever the case was, he just doesn't look good. And so I'm not sure if Bob Arum, even if he wanted to, I mean, even if Gilberto Ramirez wanted to face Uzcategui or Groves or Benavidez, that he'd be allowed to do it because Bob Arum likes those in-house fights. You know what I mean? And Gilberto Ramirez, I think he's trying to make him a good little bit of a poster boy out there in 168. But, you know, the man, all the luster is coming up off of Gilberto Ramirez for me, man. That was just, I mean, this is the second bout in a row, man. He's not fighting anybody. And for him not to fight anybody and then still have difficulties with the guy, you know, that just doesn't speak. That just doesn't that doesn't bode well. The way that Angulo looked, if Gilberto Ramirez gets in it with Uzcategui, I think that cat might, I mean, it could be trouble for him. I definitely think Jose's trouble for George Groves. I think David Benavidez, honestly, is the best of the bunch at 168. So I really would like to see, you know, David Benavidez after whatever happens with George Groves and Chris Eubank. No, excuse me, George Groves and James Degale, because I believe that's where that's headed. Because if he's saying he's looking for big fights, he's not going to move down to 160 pounds, right? And moving up to 165 pounds with the amount of trouble he's having in 168 right now, that's not realistic. And there's not a lot of big money bouts at 175. So he's got to be talking about 168. So for him to vacate, he's got to be talking about trying to set up a bout with George Groves in the UK. And that could be, I do believe that would be a real big, that would be a big match in the UK, man. And I would love to see it. However, regardless of what happens, if James Degale fights George Groves, I would, at this point, I'm favoring George Groves in that fight. But I really do want to just see it come around to unification in that. But it just looks like it's going to be a real tough match. So anyway, that's just all I really wanted to say on it. Man, I respect James Degale for vacating that belt. I really wish, the biggest problem I have with James Degale, man, is James Degale is just never, he's really talented, but he just never really did, he just wants to slug too much. He just gets into too many, and he wants to get into a slugfest, and he's not a slugger. He's a boxer. And if he just had a little bit better defense and he was willing to, you know, maybe make boxing matches a little less quote unquote exciting, you know, then he would have been able to do better with James Degale. He would have been able to do better with Truax the first time, Truax the second time. And then he might actually be able to do a little something with Jose Uzcategui. But, you know, that's just not in his character. He's a slugger. I wish him the best, but hey, man, good job vacating that belt, man, because if you had kept that belt and really did take Jose, then it would have been the end of James Degale, and there wouldn't have been any big paydays anymore. He'd have been sitting right next to Andre Dirrell. You know, he'd be sitting there and Andre Dirrell walk like Andre Dirrell, man, because Uzcategui ended that dude's career. At least he should have ended it. But we'll see if, you know, Andre comes back. But anyway, it is what it is, and that is what it is. And with that, I'm out. Peace.